Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching. My name is Luis Cortes. I am the Director of Diversity and Inclusion at Comedy Sports Chicago. And I am here with my very good friend Simon. And we are in the middle of November. And November is Transgender Awareness Month, which is also leading into Transgender Awareness Week. And that leads into the Transgender Day of Remembrance on November 20th, where we remember all of the people from the transgender community who have suffered violence and have also lost their lives. And as we as a company want to bring more awareness to these sort of days and these sort of events and these communities, I asked Simon if he would be willing to sit down and chat with me, and he very kindly said yes. So again, Simon, thank you so much. But before we go any further, Simon, could you just introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you and where you want to start. Yeah.
Sure. Hey, I'm Simon Collier. I've been improvising in Chicago for a full decade now, almost, and with comedy sports since 2013 in some capacity. Uh, Improv is a huge passion, but also I've been a member of the LGBTQ community for, forever. Done my time there, I suppose. I transitioned actually while being part of the ensemble, so this is definitely something that's like very personal to me. So happy to talk to you about it.
Yeah, actually, one of the things that I eventually want to talk about, I want to get to it, but is that idea that you were through, at least from my perspective, the larger part of your transition uh, while you were at Comedy Sports.
Mhm.
Uh, so um, I'm nervous to say I was there when it started because I don't know what that point is. So
Yeah.
I don't want to say that. I guess the most comfortable thing I can say is I was there when when the outward changes began to happen. Um,
Mhm.
what was that like while being, in this very public space while going up on stage in front of the crowds that we have?
I think that's
I know it's a very loaded question to start
it
with.
is. Well, I think, it was interesting. And I mean, you were there while it all happened. I didn't really ever consider, transitioning a possibility or anything up until about 2017. Um, and at that point, I sort of, uh, I feel like it was the same thing with my sexual orientation, where I was like in high school, I was like, well, what if I'm bisexual? Like, let me just dip my little toes in the water, test it out, see how it feels. And then eventually I was like, this seems to be, uh, less of an attraction to men, and I'm more into, just women, or, now that's even evolved ever since. But like, I think it was the same thing where I started off being like, well, let's feel how, uh, you know, just gender nonconforming, non-binary feels, and then we'll proceed from there. And so that was sort of where I started in 2017, and it was pretty uncomfortable pretty much every step of the way, just because it's not really. I mean, again, you can never tell a gender from an outward appearance, but
Right.
especially something like non-binary, you can't tell that pretty much ever without asking someone how they like to be referred to. And so audiences didn't really seem to get it. The ensemble didn't really seem to get it. And so it had some ups and downs, and I did that for about a year, and then realized this isn't working out for me, and actually, uh, you know, proceeded to go ahead and transition, and accept, like, I uh, feel more comfortable in a male body with male pronouns and all that. And here we are. And that in itself was even more awkward, I think. Uh, this is going off like a huge tangent, I
No,
suppose, but
no,
you
no.
don't, as I mentioned, I've been improvising I've been in comedy in some capacity ever since college. And so then in the city for about 10 years. And at that point, it was like 8 years deep. I'd had pretty good rhythm. I felt comfortable with all my characters, my voices, my choices that I would make. And I started to feel like I no longer knew how to perform because the tools that I was accustomed to using and working with no longer worked for me. Like
Yeah.
like vocally couldn't do some of the same things that I had done before. Some of the choices weren't as uh, effective with my new presentation. And it's been a process, I'd say, ever since to actually like figure out how to feel comfortable and confident with my performance again. And I'm still not 100%, but I'm working on it. So like, it was interesting to go from what I felt was probably like at the time my peak and most like polished form, and then have to kind of scrap that and start back at step one.
Would you say some of those, because I know you're talking about like those artistic choices you make on stage, having to update them, I guess. Would you say that was based more on you feeling different as a person? Like I know you said it was partly based on some of the changes that were happening. So
Mhm.
would you say that it was more about like, well, I have to change this now because artistically it doesn't work because of the how I'm presenting now, or is it just now Simon doesn't this doesn't work for Simon now? Does that make sense?
It does. I mean, like, to me, it was something I had to change because they no longer got the same reactions that I was accustomed to. I was like, if I do this voice or if I do this type of character, usually these things are surefire bets and they no longer hit the same way. And that could have been like a confidence thing. Like, certainly it could have been like half and half, but it seemed like, they just weren't playing as well as they normally did. And so I had to relearn basically, like, okay, well, can I adapt this to be something that works for me now? Or like, how can I tweak this? Um, and yeah, really, I just had like, there's very little, that's even tough to say because to me, again, I still feel mostly the same. To me, like nothing's really changed in my perspective of myself. But, you just have to, we're always growing and adapting anyhow, but it just seems like, yeah, the adjustments I feel like I had to make are more than an average improviser just trying to find out, what are my greatest hits,
Right, right. Because yeah, it's your mentality is changing, so it's your your comedic sensibility has to kind of adapt to that along with everything else that's going on.
Hmm.
I can,
Yeah.
I mean, I can see that can only create stress, and when you have a group like the ensemble who doesn't necessarily always get it, and because of that might not support in the proper way, being there can just exacerbate some sort of stress. I can imagine.
Yeah, I mean, there was a good, I don't know, 6, 7 months where I thought I was failing, like I did not feel like I could do the thing I liked doing anymore successfully. And either that was me holding myself to just like an incredibly high standard, and maybe like my C minus is someone else's A plus, it's like a very nebulous thing. But there were, if I did, like 50 shows, I maybe felt good about 3 or 4, as opposed to I feel good about 40 of these. Like my ratio just was flopped upside down, and it was hard to kind of dig myself out of um, that artistic hole. And actually, honestly, I was still in it before. the stay-at-homes all began, and only within this kind of digital format have I been able to, I guess, kind of like feel the freedom to find what that new voice means to me, and how to work in a way that's fun for me to perform. And I'm only now feeling, kind of more like myself again.
Now that you got an opportunity to literally step way off the stage, and it's,
Hmm.
oh yeah, that's so interesting. Essentially, just kind of play in a room with yourself
Hmm.
like we used to as kids, in the way of like imagination with no one but the walls.
Yep. Uh, yeah, because I mean, and again, a lot can happen in a year in terms of um, just like a physical transition. By the time we were in our, relegated to our homes, it had only been about a year of my transition, and it takes about a year for some things to kind of start happening and changing and becoming more apparent. And so I think, it's also now. I don't know if an audience would still have the same kind of like apprehension towards me as I felt in person. Um, but now there's really no way of knowing what anybody thinks about anything you're doing online. But I've been able to at least start to feel a little bit more at ease. So it's certainly been a process.
How do you feel that we as like an improv community, on the larger end, but also on the smaller end, a comedy sports community, what could we be doing to at least make our spaces those comfortable spaces that the comfortable space that everyone else gets to use it as? You know,
Yeah.
again, I know
There's
that's quite a loaded question.
there's a lot that can change, and I think a lot of it is in person focused. Um, but the ref spiel, or basically the ref sets the whole tone, and I think there's a lot of language in what the referee says, that, or in the announcer, both of which kind of control the entire crowd and space. And terminology certainly needs to be retired. I think people need to learn how to talk to an audience that doesn't require ma'am and sir when you're calling for a suggestion. That I think is incredibly alienating and uncomfortable. Just, you should never do it to begin with. But the moments where you're wrong, boy, does that just stop
Oh,
everyone dead in their tracks.
it's so funny when in my younger days as a newer ref, like I can probably count on both hands the times that happened to me. But I'm sitting here now realizing the fact that I let it get to two hands before I actually thought maybe I should stop is is ridiculous. It's like
Yeah.
after one or two times, it should have clicked. This creates an issue. Just don't do it. Even when not dealing with the idea of possibly misgendering someone who's part of the community, just when you know the little boy with the long hair and you call him a little girl, and like even those moments,
Yeah.
those are awkward.
Hmm.
And they're even more so when it really is someone who that sort of misgendering is such an issue in their life
Yeah.
that, I mean, I'm sure that happened a lot both on stage and off when you were at the theater.
Oh boy, yeah. I mean,
What was that like? How do you deal with that? And did you
ah,
have the proper support from the theater?
no, I mean, the number of times that I was either misgendered or misnamed in a show is more than I feel like we should have allowed, and more than I should have allowed. But I'm very much of like a, I don't like to cause a fuss mindset. And if you're in the middle of a show and someone gets your name or pronouns wrong, you don't want to call more attention to it, because you're already, it's not, that's not the time or place. So I think it's you just try to power through, but it's definitely something that like really throws you off your whole game. I can very distinctly remember it was a game of what was it? What's that called? Dance Party USA, and the ref calls out specific players and then breaks it up like, "Ooh, just the red team, just the blue team." And this is when I was still using gender neutral pronouns, and they said all the ladies, and I was like, I literally don't know what to do in this moment. Um, and it's just like stuff like that. You just sort of feel just sort of like frozen for a moment, and you just have to make a choice, but no choice feels right, and it just you feel gross at the end. So I think there's just like so much of that we don't even realize. um, those little things that are easily controllable but just so built into how we're programmed, but they make a big difference to the people that it affects.
So yeah, tell me a little bit about that because I know it's probably feeling like we've only focused on you know all the things that we have done wrong, but I want to know because I think I like to think that a lot or at least I've come to think that a lot of these choices and decisions that people make in those moments hopefully aren't coming from a deliberate place of I'm going to hurt you with this statement.
Sure.
So I always like to approach it like, here's a learning moment. Um, for a lot of us, even myself, I can admit that coming into this conversation, I was very aware of making sure that everybody feels comfortable, but also not me having me not having the knowledge about parts of this community is not your responsibility to teach me. So I can easily go out and get it. But in that interim naivete, I don't want to say something to offend someone.
Sure.
But I guess in walking that path, it's to me it's always better like just call that out, and then we don't have to sit in that awkwardness. But I'm sure you had plenty of those sort of situations along the way. But I guess what are the things that we can do that aren't, as we've said before, big sweeping changes are usually like a one and done. But what are the small things we can do, almost kind of like small daily sort of things that can create these new patterns for better behaviors?
Sure. I think like in an audience setting, always either just asking your volunteers, if they have preferred pronouns, or just like knowing to ignore them. Just you can just say, "This is Alex, and they're going to help us out with this game." Like I think just training your brain to just eliminate certain words um, is something that does take daily practice for a lot of folks, and so just getting in the habit with that is, I think, huge for both um, your players and your uh, fans. Like that's a great place to start. And I think, I know some people feel differently about pronouns and like the pronoun checks and stuff like that. I think something we have been kind of trying to implement, or were back before the you know year happened, um, was consent checks. And I think that's a great time to check in with everyone, because I think it's also important to know, like, just because you checked in about someone's gender identity at some point doesn't mean it's the same. And uh, so just being willing to adapt as people might be, you know, figuring things out, and just being willing to change, and like adapt with them. Uh, because yeah, of course I could be like, it would be great if we had gender neutral bathrooms in the theater. That would be pretty cool. But that's, that's more of a one and done kind of thing. Um, but I think it's just it all starts with you and just sort of how how you treat language and how you want to treat other people. And I think just also, you know, if you're corrected, please don't take it personally. Also, please don't make it a joke. Oh gosh, I hate that. Uh, like,
Yeah, I think that's probably something that a lot of people are like, you said yourself, like, this is something that we have to work on daily. So obviously, you're going to trip along the way. I think a lot of people are mostly afraid of that moment. The things that I've seen in the past is really just like, just apologize, correct
mhm,
yourself, and move on. But I think people have a tendency to really want to, like, oh, oh, or
mhm.
what advice do you have for people in that moment? It's not your job to teach them that, but if you have any to give.
Yeah, I think. I mean, even to your point just then, I think the biggest thing, and I read this somewhere and was like, oh God, that makes so much sense. Don't even apologize. Don't even maybe like take them aside later and say something, but um, apologizing for it forces the person to have to say it's okay, and that isn't something they should have to do because it's not necessarily okay. So just being like, oops, fix yourself and then keep going. And, at least from my experience, I hate being the center of that attention. And so, like, just make it as
Small as
just like
possible.
minor as possible. Yeah, because you're probably already so uncomfortable. Just like, let's just smooth this over, fix it, and then just plow through. Talk about it later if you want to. I'm always willing and thrilled to see someone who realizes they did something and then sends me a message later. Like that's always appreciated because they're obviously like thinking about it. But um, yeah, like the apology can force the person to have to be like, no, don't worry about it. And that's because everybody, we're in the Midwest, everyone loves to be like, it's okay. No, it can be not okay, and
Yeah,
that
it's
person
okay for
can
it not to be
have to
okay.
feel, yeah, they can feel bad about it, so they learn from it. So that's probably my biggest thing.
So so let me ask you this. I think we're coming to the end of our time here. So this is part of what, as far as I'm aware, one of our very first statements specifically for the trans community. This, I think, the very first one, if not just one of our biggest. Again, I'm happy to be corrected by anyone out there. But if what what would you like people to know? What would you like to share in this moment? I guess not to punctuate it, but since one of the reasons I wanted to do this was for the community that lives 2 blocks from the theater, but also for you. I've watched from afar this transition that I could only imagine was the hardest thing you've ever done in your life, and continues to be as you become this awesome new person that I've gotten to get to know. What are the words that Simon would like to leave on this video?
Oof, okay. That's even more of a that's probably the most loaded question because it
Save
could
us
go.
all, Simon. Save us all.
Gosh, oh, I can't. Don't. I shouldn't be responsible for that. But I don't know. I think it's okay to question who you are, and I think it's okay to do that as many times as you need to. If something doesn't fit, scrap it. keep going, because it's worth it when you get there. Don't do anything also just to make someone happy. Like, if you're not being you for yourself, then you're doing it wrong. Um, and I think, my message to improvisers is, I think this other thing that everyone can do is, we all need to learn how to do scenes where we don't presume the person we're doing a scene with automatically. Um, because that is also, can that can be uh, detrimental in a different way, because you can think, I'm coming in as this character who doesn't have a gender, or is this gender, or whatever, because literally we can be anything we want to be in improv. And so when someone um, consistently puts you in like the same casted box, then that feels very bad. So we need to break those habits. So improvisers, stop it. um, and yeah, I don't know, I mean, just don't, I mean, the world is scary, but don't be afraid also, because I can honestly say, like, it was a very scary choice, and there's a lot to be there's a lot of apprehension that comes along with it. The world isn't always kind, but like, at the end of the day, I am way happier and way more comfortable and confident than I've ever been in my life. So it's nothing I regret, and I would do it again. Like, I that's why I wake up and keep doing what I'm doing, and that's why I want to talk to people, because it's absolutely worth it. Um, so just, be you. Don't don't let people tell you you can't do something, because you can, and you should, unless it's mean. Don't do anything out mean on purpose. That's where I draw the line.
All right. Uh,
I hope
well,
that was good.
no, I love it. I love it. Like you said, that was a loaded question. Um, but no, I really appreciate you taking the time. I I I feel like the more we can show not just our audiences, but even our own comedy sports family, Chicago and worldwide, these communities are present in our ensemble, and we need to speak up. We need to speak up for them because they speak up for us. And we can easily just, you take care of us, we take care of you, everyone's taken care of. um, I know we still have a lot of work. So I appreciate your bluntness, and I don't ask those questions to put anybody on blast, but a little bit, but more, to so people are aware. Because, like I said, some of these choices, I like to think that they're not being made on purpose. So that means they're accidental, and those things can be fixed.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Overall, I have very few complaints. I love the theater, and I love the people in it. It's just, it's a learning curve for everybody, and that just takes time.
Yeah, and we could definitely try harder. Um, but like I said, I love everything you said. Thank you for your time. For everyone out there, oh, and especially, as I've mentioned before, with these awareness months that go on throughout the year. I know in the past I've always felt like they kind of come off as the theater kind of patting themselves on the back, going, "Look at what we're doing." Um, but really, I want to use them more as an opportunity to thank that community for choosing our space as the place to express themselves. It is only a gift when you can get as many communities on the stage to voice the voice of the city, and hopefully we can do that a lot more and more and more as we progress online, and hopefully back onto our stage at some point soon. Again, Simon, thank you, everyone. Please continue watching the shows Fridays and Saturdays, 7:30 and 9:30 Central. Please follow us on Twitch. Please follow us on Facebook. And thank you so much, Simon. Please have an amazing day, an amazing month. And I'm sure we'll play again soon. We're probably playing this weekend. So
Probably.
probably. So thank you.